Hey there neighbors, Kevin here with etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the etrailer trailer axle beam with easy grease spindles here on our utility trailer. So our neighbor came to us today and he was just needing to have his leaf springs and shackle straps replaced. The bolt that he had broken on one of the shackle straps, and it was kind of just all corroded up into the hanger. So we had to bust that all free, but while I was doing that I looked over at the axle tube and noticed that it was completely straight. And at that point it tells me that the axle was actually overloaded and it was now bent. Typically the center of your axle beam should be angled up just a little bit, because as you add that weight it will then straighten itself out, and that is how you're going to get the correct wear on your tires as well. So with the axle already being straight, anytime we add load on here, that's going to now press the axle down. So now instead of just straightening itself out, it's now pressing down, and then we're going to get uneven wear on our tires again, and it's going to be more on the inside of our tires. So it's just a unsafe and costly issue that we're dealing with here at this point. So swapping out the axle is going to be the way to help save not only our wheels, but also make sure that potentially that axle is not going to snap in half when we add all that weight back onto our trailer. So to figure out exactly which replacement you're going to need, you're going to first check out what the axle capacity is. There should be a tag, which is typically just a white sticker right in the center of the axle, but if yours is like ours where it was completely corroded away and that axle tag was gone, the next step is going to be actually measuring the axle tube diameter. You can take a pair of calipers and do so. Sometimes a lot of people will just use a tape measure and eyeball it, but if you do, there is the risk that you might potentially pick out the wrong diameter there with that. So if that is the case, maybe you want to look at some other components. Your hub should have some kind of part number stamped into it. Ours is an idler, so on the back side there should be a code or a part number stamped into it. Typically on a drum assembly, you'll have that right on the face of it, and then you can look up exactly what the capacity is for that as well. Once we figure out exactly what our capacity is, the next step is going to be measuring. So we want to measure from center to center of our spring seats, which that's where it actually hooks up to our leaf spring, and that's going to be essentially center to center of our frame rail here on our trailer. And we want that all to be in line, so that way when we put our leaf springs on, those can match up with our hangers and sit nice and straight with our frame rail. The following measurement is going to be hub face to hub face, so that's where our wheels are going to sit. We want to make sure that when we swap this axle out, the new one is going to have our wheels sit in the same location, so that way we don't have the wheels sitting so far out that they're now not being covered by our fender, and then potentially adding more wind resistance and getting caught on something else, or just kind of sitting too far out. Maybe that's going to push us too far out into the lane here, to where we are sitting a little bit too wide where we shouldn't be. So when it's time to measure for your axle, we've already swapped over in this case, so it's a little bit cleaner. I don't have the hub on just yet, so our second measurement we're going to have to get that hub back on for. But the first one we're going to go for is our spring center. We can have somebody hold on to the end of it and hold that right in the center of our spring pack on our old unit. Then we'll bring our tape measure over, and if you want to come on over here, John, you can see we're sitting right at 74 inches from center to center of our spring pack. So I'm going to get our hub thrown back on now, and then we can measure from hub face over to the other hub face, which is going to stick out a little bit further. So now I have the hubs installed on both sides of my axle, and I've got a second person over there, and I'm going to have him pull to the front of the hub face. So this is right where the wheel is going to rest, and that's what we need measurement-wise here, because we want our wheel to sit in the same place that it's at previously, so that way it matches up with our fender and has the correct amount of spacing between the tire and the frame, so that it's not rubbing on the frame. So in our case, we're sitting right at 89 inches. So we have an 89-inch hub face to hub face measurement, and then a 74-inch spring center to spring center. So as far as installation goes, swapping out the axle isn't really too tough. It really just kind of depends on how worn and corroded your rest of your suspension is. So you will be needing to take off your U-bolts here, completely disconnect the axle from your leaf springs, and then you're going to need probably a second set of hands so you can slide stuff around. Getting it actually under there, especially if you don't have like a lift where it has it super high up in the air for you, can be a little bit challenging. So like what I'll do during the install is I stuck a piece of styrofoam on the end of our hub, and then I just slid it across so that way I wouldn't be scraping it against the ground. You'd need to have a pretty smooth surface to do that, so you might have to switch over to something else if you don't have a second set of hands. You will also need enough jack stands to actually lift up your trailer by the frame, so that way you have room to work under there, and then you're taking that load off of the suspension so that you can actually get everything disconnected, get the new axle in place, and be all good to go. So this can turn into kind of a big job depending on what your trailer setup's like. So if you feel like this might be more than what you can handle, please feel free to use our dealer locator, and you can enter in your zip code to find a shop near you and get it professionally installed. Now, if you are wanting to do this yourself, stick around and I'll walk you through the process. So to start off our install, we're going to be lifting up our trailer by the frame, so that way our suspension and our axle can hang free. I do have a jack stand under that side of the axle over there, and I'm going to do the same over on this side, but I'm going to get the tire out of the way to make it a little bit easier to get to. So starting off, let's get that wheel removed. So since I am going to be saving this hub and putting this on our next axle tube, I am going to have to pop this off first. If you are in that situation, what you're going to want to do is get yourself a rubber mallet, and we're going to hit our dust cap here at about a 45-degree angle, and we'll keep spinning our hub around as we're doing that, and that's going to help free that up. If yours is all kind of chunked up with stuff, like there's a ton of mud all over this, I just took a little scraper and just kind of cleaned it up a bit. That way it's a little bit easier to see, especially right where the cap meets the end of our hub here. So I'm going to get this popped off, and then we can keep moving forward. And it's just as easy as that. After that, I like to take a pair of needle nose, and we're going to have our cotter pin here. We just want to bend that back so that it's nice and straight, and then we can pull it out through the other side. I'll set that aside. I have new ones that came with my next axle that we're going to be installing here, so I'm not going to save it. If I was just repacking the bearings, I would end up saving this, but at this point, we can kind of just toss all this and start over with some new stuff. So here's our axle nut. We're also going to have a flat washer in here for our spindle, and the outer bearing came with it. I am going to be saving this outer bearing, so I am going to have to clean this up. I'm going to spray this out real good with some brake clean and really run it through, and then we'll repack these before we go ahead and put them in the hub again on our new axle. Now we can pull our hub assembly straight off. And I'm going to wipe the spindle off just a bit. Normally I'd really clean this up, but since we're replacing the axle, I don't really need to go too crazy with it. It's just a lot cleaner to have it wiped down when you go to throw it away. Now to remove our leaf spring, we are going to need to take out the two hanger bolts that are here. In our case, we have shackle straps on one end, and what we're going to need to do is also pop those out. For that, we are going to want to make sure that we have a wrench on the bolt head side. So in our case, they have the bolt head on the inside with the nut on the outside here. We want to make sure that we don't end up letting that bolt spin around on the inside of our hanger, because there's going to be splines that are on that bolt that actually bite in, and once we get it out, you'll see it on the hanger itself. There's little teeth marks in it, and we don't want that spinning. We want that to stay nice and stationary. So keeping a wrench on that and not allowing it to move while you break the nut free is going to be key to saving your hangers here. So I've got my impact on here, and on the bolt head side I'm using 13/16. On the nut side I've got 7/8. That may vary depending on your trailer setup though. This one's pretty loose. Shouldn't be able to push that out by hand, but I mean, you can see just how corroded out this bolt is right now. It's all chewed up, and the splines are almost gone at this point, so that's probably why it was wanting to spin on me here. All right, if you haven't done so already, make sure that you have your axle supported, because as soon as we take this last bolt out, there's gonna be nothing holding up our axle anymore. So I'm gonna hit this with my dead blow. And you're going to get to a point where it's probably not going to want to go out anymore. And that's where you could either use another bolt or in most cases I'll usually use a punch and we'll get it out the rest of the way. That does not want to come out, but I think it's because it's leveraging against the shackle strap. Let me pop this one off so we can get this strap out of the way. Pull both out. So that was what was hanging up on us here. You can see it, the hanger was just resting on it right here and just digging all the way through it. Eventually this would have just cut it off. Now I have my new axle tube here ready to go. I've got it laying in the correct orientation right now. And what I like to do is put the axle tag facing towards the back of the trailer so that hopefully less stuff is going to pop up and hit it, you know, rocks, other road debris. And the other thing here is to make sure that you actually have this oriented the correct way, you know, whether it's upside down or not. So you can see there's a slight bend upwards with our axle tube right at the center. And that's what we want to see, because as we add on that load, it's going to straighten itself out by bending down more as it takes on all of that weight. So if you have this the other way, if you had it flipped down, what's going to happen is as you add that load on, it's going to bend too far down now. So it's super important that you install this correctly. And there's even a little arrow on here showing you which way it needs to face, just to make sure that you're doing it properly. Now, if you're doing this by yourself, you don't have a second set of hands to help get this over into place. What you can do is grab like a piece of styrofoam, a cardboard box, something like that that can slide on the ground here. We have a pretty smooth pavement inside of our shop here. If you're doing this outside on more of a rough pavement, maybe you're doing this out in the street in front of your house, then that's where I'd probably grab someone else or maybe find something with wheels on it that would actually fit under your trailer so you can get it through. But I'm just going to use this styrofoam that we had laying here from another install. Use that to slide it across. I'm going to set this back up on my jack on this side. I'm going to go over to the other side, get that set up, and then we should be good to get our leaf springs in place and get our U-bolts on. All right, so I'm actually going to flip my axle tube upside down just so that I don't have gravity fighting against me here. And we're going to get this first one in. So I want to set my leaf spring with the nub into the spring center here. There's a little opening in our spring center. You can see the wiring in there because this already has some wiring ran if you do have electric drum brakes. We don't in this case, just an idler hub, but I want to make sure that I got that bolt head poking into that hole. And then the little retention clip that we have, we want that facing towards the front of our trailer, which is over that way. So we got that how we want it. I'm going to now put my tie plate on and then run my U-bolts, oh, not that way, right on through this way. These are going to come with lock washers with this specific set and then a nut. And you'll want to refer to the manufacturer's specifications for what these need to be torqued down to, because each one's just slightly different depending on the bolt. Get that second one in. And while you're doing it too, you want to make sure that you're kind of going back and forth between them, almost in a star pattern, even though it's not really a star here. So that way it stays nice and even as you tighten it down. All right, with our U-bolt torqued down, now we're just getting down to the hardware. So I've got my eyelet lined up over here at the front of the trailer. At the back, we're gonna have our shackle straps. I've got that already pressed in. We'll just pop that bolt through, and the one thing I should have shown you, actually, let me pop that back out. Like I talked about before, there's those splines on there that bite into our hanger and prevent the bolt from just sitting there and spinning. Because the only thing we want spinning really is just inside that bushing. We want it to flow back and forth as the suspension compresses and decompresses. You really won't have much spinning up here at the front. If this was a tandem axle, you'd probably have a little bit more movement, but the majority of the movement's going to be back here with our shackle straps. So we'll get this hammered in place. We'll get our nut on the back. And just kind of make sure you don't have any little bit of it sticking out. Looks pretty good to me. So then we can come back with our wrench at the backside here and tighten that down. I'm gonna wait to just snug it down all at once. So I'm gonna come over here. We may have to play around with our jack a little bit, but actually that lined right up perfectly. We'll just... All right, now we'll take our last shackle strap and throw that on. And this should come together a little bit better once we actually tighten it down with our nut here. So now at this point, I'm just going to snug down the bolts, and then I'll torque them to the manufacturer's specs. Manufacturer specs can vary manufacturer to manufacturer, so definitely make sure that you're double checking yours and not overdoing it. If you do overdo it, it's going to end up pinching the hanger down onto the leaf spring or onto the shackle bolts, or shackle straps, sorry. And then the suspension's not going to be able to move back and forth, which is going to end up binding up, and then eventually something's going to give, and that's typically going to be the shackle strap. So make sure that you don't over tighten it. Really make sure you're following those steps from the manufacturer. So. All right, it's getting a little stiff. Now make sure also, if any bolt that's into a hanger, like I said, has those splines bit into it, so make sure that you got a wrench on there and you're not allowing that to move. Now technically this one over here isn't biting into my hanger because it's going into my shackle strap, because that is going to have to move back and forth, but I just find it easier to not have the bolt spin on me at all while I try and tighten down the other nut. Now that everything is properly tightened down, our axle is in place fully. All we have left is to just reinstall our hub assembly, get our wheel on, torque down our lug nuts, and then our trailer is all ready to hit the road. That's going to do it for a look at and installation of the etrailer trailer axle beam with easy grease spindles here on a utility trailer. My name's Kevin, and if you still have some questions about what's going to be the right replacement axle for your trailer setup, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out on your journey.